Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bahar Quran, and today we have a guest speaker, Omer M. Mozaffar. Omer M. Mozaffar teaches at Loyola University, Chicago, where he is the Muslim chaplain teaching courses in theology and literature. He has given thousands of talks on Islam since 9/11. He is also a Hollywood technical consultant for productions on matters related to Islam, Arabs, and South Asians. In 2009, Roger Ebert named him as one of his far-flung correspondents. In 2011, the Graham School of the University of Chicago honored him with an Excellence in Teaching Award in Humanities, Arts, and Sciences. He is a lifelong Chicagoan, involving himself in various educational and social service and charitable projects. So he's going to be speaking about raising sincere Muslims children in America. And if you guys have questions, put in the chat box and we'll go over them at the end of the speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bahar. That was a very, very generous introduction, and I hope that I can be of benefit in my talk. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فنعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم لتركبن طبقا عن طبق صدق الله العلي العظيم. So, my beloved brothers and sisters and sons and daughters, we praise Allah, we thank Allah, and we seek blessings upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the passage that I quoted is simple in the paraphrase translation. Allah Ta'ala is telling us that He is raising us level by level, degree by degree, which is very much related to the experience of growing up or the experience of parenting our children. And so after talking to our esteemed Dr. Ali, he suggested I give you this talk, Raising Sincere Muslim Children in America. And my outline is very simple, 5 parts, and it'll seem much less than 5 parts. First is just assumptions that I have to discuss for this specific audience that I am speaking to, inshallah. And then first principles for us to consider, a second principle, and then less obvious phases of parenting, and then less obvious phases of religious education. And when I'm saying less obvious, this will become more apparent when we're speaking about the assumptions and the principles and such. And as Bahar mentioned, if you have questions, by all means, please text them to her through the various means, and inshallah, I'll try my best to answer them for you. So first, let's talk about the assumptions. Now, through my interactions with Dr. Ali and through others in the Islamic Organization of the Midwest, it's I know that I'm not talking to lay people here. I'm talking to people who already have a strong foundation in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so there's a lot of things I'm not going to discuss. So this is not an introduction to parenting. This is sort of some additional ideas to think about. And further, what I also know is that this community is very, very strong in addressing matters of family. In fact, of all the various Muslim communities in Chicago, and I mean this with sincerity, this community has one of the strongest cores in terms of family. So there's a lot of things there that I don't have to talk about. It doesn't mean you don't have struggles. All of us have struggles. But mashallah, from what I've seen, at least from the outside, even with all of your struggles, especially the international struggles, mashallah, you're doing an amazing job. And of course, the word we use in Urdu is khidmat, and I think you know the Turkish equivalent of khidmat. This community is very, very strong in hizmat. And so that's also material that I don't have to address because you're already very, very strong there. And if you're very strong in khidmat, you're also very strong in community itself. And so when I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking as a friend, not as much as an advisor. I'm speaking looking at your community within our greater Muslim community, mashallah, as brothers and sisters, as people that I can actually learn from for perhaps even more than what I can teach. So may Allah Ta'ala give this community more and more high himma, more and more motivation, more and more fortitude, and more successes against all of the struggles, both in terms of dunya as well as especially in akhirah. So what is my overall assumption? My overall assumption is that when it comes to deen, you're already very strong. And so my goal is just to help all of us take these things a step further. So from there, let's talk about some basic principles about parenting and such. So your best contribution to society is an upright child. And consider the point that I'm making, that when Bahar introduced me, mashallah, she said I gave thousands of talks. So since 9/11, this is not an exaggeration. I've probably given over 10,000 talks on Islam. Every type of location you can think of: church, store, corporation, synagogue, and of course, masajid and schools and such. Everywhere I've given an introduction to Islam. Thousands and thousands of hours. And I would still suggest that 1 hour with my own children, mashallah, I have two daughters, 1 hour with my own children has more value than 1,000 hours of speeches. And this I really, really believe, that 1 hour with my own children is direct attention. That has much more impact on my children than me giving 1,000 speeches. And let's say each speech has 1,000 people. Allah knows best. But what I'm then saying is that my best contribution of all the things that I do, my best contribution to society is to raise my children to be upright. And if they enter society as upright children, they're helping society becoming more upright. And the second thing to consider, which is very related, is an upright child is your best contribution, or one of your best contributions, to your own akhirah, your own afterlife. And consider the hadith. We all know this one very, very famous hadith, that after you die, there's three things that will stay and will keep earning for you. You all know this hadith. One is sadaqah jariyah. Maybe you make a fountain and other people are still drinking from it. Another one is writing of knowledge that other people benefit from. And the third one is when you have upright children who are praying for you. So one of the best contributions to my own akhirah is that I raise my children to be upright. And this, again, I think we all understand this, but I want us to really, really establish that we are looking at raising our children, not from the perspective of dunya, but from the perspective of deen. And all of this is just reinforcement for all of you. And the third big point, and sometimes this is harder to accept, I do not own my children. My child is a part of me. I'm there from the moment of birth and through all the milestones, when my child crawls, when my child smiles, when my child walks, when my child reads. Now I have one child in college, mashallah, the other one is in high school, when my child drives, when my child then graduates. But I do not own my child. Allah Ta'ala owns my children. Allah Ta'ala owns your children. This is a very important point. So what are we saying? That with the birth of my child, Allah Ta'ala has entrusted me with this soul, to raise this soul to be a servant of Allah Ta'ala. As soon as the child is born, Allah Ta'ala has put a responsibility on me to give this child back to Allah Ta'ala as an upright Muslim. So these are the three points I'd like us to think about. And by all means, as you're following along, feel free even to disagree. But these, in terms of parenting, I consider these to be sort of the first principles. Your best contribution to society in dunya, one of your best contributions to your own akhirah, and then your child is actually from Allah. The second principle to think about is America itself. So I was born in Pakistan. My family came here when I was about 2 years old. And so I've been living in Chicagoland almost consistently, almost nonstop for nearly 50 years. And so I've been through the whole history, so much of the history of Islam in Chicago. I've watched the masajid all open up. I'm old enough to remember when MCC opened, when Mosque Foundation opened. And of course, I remember when Niagara came to Chicago and such. And a point to think about that we forget is the way to imagine America is number one in two industries. In all the other industries, may or may not be. In two industries, it's number one, unquestioned. Number one, in military. As you know, that America's military, the budget is higher than the rest of the world times 9. So all the other countries together times 9 is then how much we spend in terms of our military. And the second aspect of society where America is number one, the second aspect is entertainment. And a point to think about is that America's entertainment, its mythology that it gives to the whole world, The first people who drink from that mythology are Americans, where we believe that there is something special and unique about America compared to all of human history. And what happens then is that when communities from the outside move into America, America is such a powerful force that it almost wipes out everybody. And you may have heard the line that the first generation, they lose the language, the second generation, they lose the culture, third generation, they lose religion. And I've been watching this happen even with Muslim communities in America too. Because most of my work, as Bahar mentioned, I work at the college level. And so all day long, I'm talking to college students. And it's as though I'm watching these young people who are ready to join the world, ready to join the professional society, but they've not been equipped, especially in terms of deen. And so the second principle to consider is that America is one of the most powerful forces in all of world history against your well-being. But I mean, this is obviously, there's a lot of good in America. I live here. America is a big part of my formation. So I don't want to tell you that America is a big shaitan, but I am telling you that America is powerful. So having said that, those are the first principles and the second principles. And the next thing that I want to talk about are less obvious matters in terms of phases of parenting and less obvious matters in phases of education. And then we'll open the door for questions. So in terms of phases of parenting, the foundation for what you see on the screen, we see baby and toddler, grade school, age 14, which is an adult, college, and marriage. The actual foundation here, if we take all the phases of growth that we find in the Quran and the Hadith, in the teachings of the Sahaba as well, we find what? Age 0 to 2 is one milestone. And then that's in the Quran. We're at the age of weaning. And then we have from the teaching of Ali radiallahu an, age 0 to 7, and then 7 to 14. And then, of course, we have the last part of youth, or the final beginning of adulthood is age 40. And then we also know that the Prophet may be died at age 63. And so I'm actually taking that material, I'm not putting it on the screen, but I'm saying 0 to 2, 0 to 7, which I'm calling grade school. 7 to 14 is the latter part of grade school, and then beyond adulthood. And what is the teaching of Ali, may Allah be pleased with him? And you all know this, but just to repeat to make sure we all know it together, is from age 0 to 7, you play with your child. And 7 to 14, you mold and discipline your child. And then after that, you become your child's friend. So now I'd like us to look at each of these phases and think about what I'm saying. That when you have a newborn child, consider that child's experience in the first seconds in this dunya, right? The child is in the mother's womb, totally protected in this very, very tight, small shell and being nourished nonstop, both with food as well as with the mother's nourishment, and perhaps even hearing the father's voice. So for example, it's advised that when mother is pregnant with the child, to help the child listen to good things, that it's very good for the father to recite Quran, to let the child hear Quran while still inside the belly. And I'll tell you something interesting. The scholars teach us that when it's time for delivery, when the mother is having contractions, that you should recite Surah Maryam into the belly, into the mother's belly, and let the child hear Surah Maryam. And something funny, this was with our first child, that I was doing this. And there's one ayah that's repeated in Surah Maryam after every ruku, every two rukus. And I'll give you the simple translation in English. Peace on him from the day he was born until the day he dies. So this is about Isa alayhi salam, this is about Musa alayhi salam, so forth and so on. Peace on him from the day he was born till the day he dies. And every single time I came to that ayah, baby would have a contraction, mother would have a contraction. And then I keep reciting, and then as soon as I come to that ayah, contraction. And reciting, contraction. So one advice is, number one, when the baby is still in the mother's belly, is to give all kinds of nourishment in addition to your natural nourishment. Let the baby hear the father's voice, and from the father's voice, let the baby hear Quran, let the baby hear the word of Allah. And of course, you know what we do after the baby is born. There's a number of things we do. For example, you do adhan and iqama, you do the piece of the date, so forth and so on, you do those things. those are the things we all know. But additionally, what you'll see that I've written on the screen is kind of hard to read, is underneath where I wrote baby and toddler, give your child security and give your child freedom. And the freedom part is easy to understand. The teaching of Ali radiallahu an is what? For the first 7 years, let them play. Let them play. That for a child, that is the way they work. The way I go to work, that's what a child needs to do to play. They have to play. But also give them security. And when you have a baby, how do you give the security? You hold the baby tightly. You hold the baby tightly and warmly in your arms. And you and I know when we have a newborn, we wrap the baby very, very tightly in the blanket so the baby can feel secure, just like when the baby was inside mother. And keep doing this. Keep holding your baby tightly. And if your baby is then taught to feel secure that way, your child, inshallah, will innately start developing an inner sense of security. That's what we want our child to have. We want our child inside, in his or her heart, to feel secure. And so one of the first steps to do that is when you're holding your child, hold your child very, very tightly, full of love. And I think all of you understand this, but I'm emphasizing this because when we go back to what I said about the first principle or the second principle about America, one of the ways America always wins is by separating everybody from everybody else, to forcing you to be an individual. And you know, our deen, you're both an individual and you're part of a collective. When I am reciting Al-Fatiha in every prayer, I'm saying, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. You alone, we worship, you alone, we ask for help. And even though I'm alone, I'm still saying we. Even though I'm still alone in my prayer, I'm saying we worship you, Ya Allah. We ask you for help. And so in our deen, you're an individual. You will face Allah as an individual, but in this dunya, you're part of a collective. And part of that is the need to feel secure. First source of security is your parents. So that's looking at the baby and the toddler. And so another way to think about this is that you're giving your child a feeling of stability. That if changes are happening, maybe you're moving from one house to another, maybe you're moving from one city to another, or from one country to another. The child is looking to the parents saying, how should I respond to this? How should I understand this? So another way to give security to your child is anytime there's a change, explain to your child what is happening and make it clear that everything is fine. So sometimes, unfortunately, we'll even have families that will break up. And when the families break up, they don't tell the children what's happening. And so the child is losing the sense of security. And so anytime there's a transition of any sort, positive or negative, walk the child by explanation. Here's what is happening, and explain it to them in their language, but also make it clear they are okay, they're safe, they're stable. And so the more secure your child feels, the more secure your child will know to feel as they get older when bigger challenges come in their life. So that's the first part of ages 0 to 7, especially 0 to 2. And then when we're speaking of grade school, one of the things that's very, very strong in our Muslim community is that we have a very strong focus on education. I mean, us and a few other communities, the Jews, the Hindus, we have very, very strong focus on education. But one point I want to add to this is when we are punishing and rewarding our children, a common mistake that I see from many parents is sometimes we punish our child too much, or sometimes we reward our child too much. Now, what do I mean by this? That anytime you are punishing your child or criticizing your child should understand why. There should be a logic. Okay, I broke my toy out of anger, and now my parents are upset. So they should be able to understand I'm being punished for this action. Yeah. Because what happens if I'm being punished and I don't understand why I'm being punished, then I'm going to think there's something wrong with me. I hope you all understand that when there's criticism given, when there's punishment given, the child should understand the logic. The child should understand why. Even the intensity of the punishment, the child should understand, oh, I broke this very important dish. This is why my mother is very angry. You know, as opposed to spilling milk where my parents were angry, but they weren't that angry. And so they should see a logic. If they don't see a logic and they're being punished and they don't understand why, they're going to think something is wrong with them. And so in the same way, the parents are a source of security. The parents can either give or take away a sense of the child's understanding of right and wrong. And the opposite is also true. That if you're rewarding your child, if you're praising your child, oh, you did such a good job, I'm so proud of you, this is excellent, then your child should see a logic. I'm being rewarded because I did this good deed. I'm being rewarded because I got this good grade. I'm being rewarded because I helped this person. And then again, there's a logic. And so the child is understanding, if I do wrong, this is the punishment. If I do right, this is the reward. If I get rewarded too much, then the child is going to think, nothing is wrong with me, I'm perfect. And that is a different type of problem. That's arrogance. So one type of problem is self-hate if I'm getting punished and I don't understand why. The other type of problem is arrogance if I think I'm so great for no reason. And so the point is that punishment should match the crime, so to speak, and reward should match the good deed. And if that is there, then what is your child naturally going to develop? The child is naturally going to develop a sense of how justice operates, both in terms of how it should operate in dunya and their relationship with Allah Ta'ala. So I'm going to come back to this point in a moment, but a point I'd like you to consider is my experience with my parents is going to affect my experience with Allah Ta'ala. So I'm introducing that to you right now, but we're going to come back to that point to explain it further. But one way is how I understand punishment and reward. It's coming from my parents. I'm then going to associate that with Allah Ta'ala. If I see my parents as unfair, I'm going to see Allah Ta'ala as unfair. And I'll share some stories about this in a moment. So that's the second phase. So age 0 to 7, first we did 0 to 2 and then 0 to 7. Let your child play, give them punishment and reward. And you see the third word that I wrote here is to give them a sense of competition. So one of the places where America is very strong is everything is about competition. Sports, so much focus on competition. Even in court, so much focus on competition. Grades in school, so much focus on competition. But we also have that teaching in our deen. This is in Surah Al-Baqarah, right near the beginning, middle of Surah Al-Baqarah. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. That we are being taught, be the first, compete, race against each other in doing good. And so here, you want to teach your child to be competitive in doing good. Not competitive in the sense of winning every award. Only a few children can do that. But competitive in doing good. So let them compete with each other in doing good. But our competition of good is so interesting. Because let's say I'm 8 years old and I have a cousin, let's say Dr. Ali and I grew up together, and young future Dr. Ali is my next door neighbor. And I see Dr. Ali is taking care of all these people, then I'm going to be in competition with him. I also have to take care of many people. But when you're competing in good, you're also getting rewarded for helping. So if I help Dr. Ali help other people, that also helps me. And if Dr. Ali helps me to help other people, that also helps him. So what I'm saying is that part of the American experience is you're conditioned to be competitive. And so your goal is to give them healthy competition. Competing in khairat, competing in doing good, competing in doing the good for other people. If you can do that, now you've created something stronger that it will then take to the next level. So now let's get into the next phase, age 7 to 14. And as we said, that the teaching of Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, is you mold your child. So I spoke about punishing and rewarding. But when we get to the age 14, what does Ali say? Imam Ali radiallahu anh, he says that when your child turns 14, play with your child. Or I'm sorry, when your child turns 14, be your child's friend. Now, in my experience, so right now I'm a college professor, but I used to run a Sunday school and I've taught literally all ages. I've taught 2-year-olds, I've taught 5-year-olds, I've taught 30-year-olds, I've taught 80-year-olds, I've taught every age. And I can tell you from experience over and over again that a 14-year-old understands everything intellectually. Everything a 30-year-old understands, a 14-year-old understands. The 14-year-old doesn't have life experience. So the 14-year-old doesn't have life experience to understand from a practical level how life works. But intellectually, they understand everything. And so whether it's a work of literature, a work of art, or even many layers of the Quran, a 14-year-old can understand the same thing that a 60-year-old can understand. And I mean that with full respect for a 60-year-old, but I'm saying often in our communities, we don't appreciate that about 14-year-olds. And so what I'm suggesting is when your child is 14, treat them like an adult. Treat them like they are your friend. Talk to them like they're your friend. Now, another aspect of the American experience where America is very strong is America focuses on the youth in one specific way by saying the youth are the future. Now, of course, there's not as much investment. You know, I was going through a book today that says in the California public system, they spend $3 billion for the university system and $9 billion for the prison system. So there's a problem in our education system in our society. But what I'm saying is that we always look at the youth as the voice of the next generation, as though everyone wants to be youth and no one wants to be old. I love getting old, much of them. But the point here is that when your child is 14, talk to them the same way you talk to your friend. Because what is your child receiving when you talk to them with that level of maturity? When you're talking to your child as an adult, when your friends are talking to your child as an adult, they're being told, I'm an adult. And they'll behave like an adult. If you tell your child to behave like a 7-year-old, then your child is learning, okay, I should behave like a 7-year-old. And this is a big problem in our society. We call it the infantilization of adults, where adults who are now 20 years old behave like a 13-year-old. Adults who are 30 years old behave like an 18-year-old. But maturity-wise, they're still new, but talk to them like an adult, which then means engage with them in their intellectual questions. This we'll talk more when we get into the phases of religious education. Right now, we're just doing parenting. Talk to them about these things. And I said, when they're younger, focus on competition. Now you want to shift the focus of competition to a focus on excellence. Itban, ihsan. So before you're competing with each other, and it's in our tradition. You and I know that Omer would compete with Abu Bakr. Omer would decide, okay, I'm going to beat Abu Bakr today. I'm giving away half of my wealth. He comes and he discovers Abu Bakr has already given all of his wealth. In excellence, now what are you doing? You're trying to be as perfect as you can in your relationship with Allah. And so now you're taking that focus of competition, and you're making it a determination for excellence. Which means what? Now you're focusing on the details of everything, to do everything properly. And so this is now what we do when they're at that age. So age 14 is essentially the middle of high school and on until they get into adulthood. And then we enter college life. And there are some parents who I tell them, you're my job security. Because we have many parents who, mashallah, they work really hard. They'll work 40 hours a week, they'll work 80 hours a week and give their child life in the best suburbs in Chicago and give them every tutor, give them every technology, but they won't ever spend any time with them. And think of the point I made at the beginning. I've given literally, mashallah, 10,000 speeches at least. May Allah accept all of them and all of the works of every one of us. But I still believe 1 hour with my children is greater in use and benefit than 1,000 hours of speeches. And so this also applies that an hour with your child is much more valuable than so many hours focused on job. Some of us don't have a choice. Some of us, you have to work all day long to be able to put food on the table. I'm talking about the people who have a choice. And then there's another issue. I'm going to tell you some stories now. I had a student. Both parents were doctors, and he his siblings and friends called me saying, "You have to get him." I'm just going to give him some generic name. I wouldn't even. We'll just call him John, but he's Muslim, and they're trying to find John. Finally, they find him, and I get on the phone trying to convince him, let me pick you up because everyone's worried about you. Why? Because he was in a crack house. He's in a drug house. His parents are devout Muslims, pray 5 times a day. Yeah. They're both doctors, so upper class, and they give every expense in terms of all the needs of the child. And I'm talking to him, saying, "Let me pick you up. Let me just take you home because you're not in a safe place." Finally, after a few hours, he lets me pick him up, and then I'm driving him home. And the drive is about an hour long, 11 o'clock at night. And he's shouting, he's saying, "My parents don't treat me like I'm an adult. I'm 21 years old. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want." And he's Arab, I'm Pakistani. I said, "Look, your parents are just like my parents. They're never going to stop being your parents. Okay? You think you're an adult, and you shouldn't listen to them. I guarantee you, my parents will never stop checking on me." And this is 11 o'clock at night. I'm driving home, and my phone rings, and it's the Bluetooth in the car. And who's calling at 11 o'clock at night? My mother. I'm nearly 50 years old, and my mother calls me, and she's checking, "Where are you? How come you're on the road?" And I'm saying, "I'm with a student, taking a student home." And she's talking to me in Urdu, and that was a quick phone call. And then the student says, "I didn't understand anything she said, but I understood everything she said." But what did he see? That here's my mother, who's nearly 50. I'm nearly 50 years old, so imagine how much older my mother is. She's checking on me at my age, and so we never stop being parents. And so for him, his parents are still good to worry about him. But the point I'm making, my beloved brothers and sisters, is that as we are raising our children, I said we don't own our children, but age 0 to 1, we have 100% influence. 1 to 2, 100% influence. 2 to 3, 100% influence. Then they go to school. Now our influence goes down to 90%. Then they go to first grade, second grade, third grade. Now our influence is going down to 80%. Then they go to high school, and then they have social media, and now our influence is going down to 60%. And when we get to college, now our influence is going down to 50%. So seriously think about everything we're giving to our children by the time they enter my world, the college students, because this is a tough world. So you continue all the things from above, but you also need to figure out how to help your child grow in this environment. And the key here is, if you don't have the intellectual tools to help challenge and grow your child, find a mentor who can. So back in our home countries, often there's much more of a sense of a village, and there'd be the sheikh of the village, the teacher of the village, the teacher of the neighborhood. And if the parents didn't have an answer, they would go to this elder. And so here, what you need to do as your child is growing through these ages, by the time you want to get to college, you want to find someone or a couple people who can be their mentor. So if they're asking you tough questions and you can't answer it, the mentor can ask it. And this is essentially my job at Loyola as chaplain. I'm literally their mentor. So they have the relationship with their parents, and I'm always telling them, "Listen to your parents." But then with me, they ask all those questions they don't want to ask their parents. All these personal questions about life, personal questions in relationships. So we have to help them in this expansion. How? By mentors. And the second thing, which is especially important for the 20-year-old, one of the things that we noticed last year when the protests were taking over George Floyd, you saw so many young people in the streets that were marching in protest, week after week, week after week, week after week. And if there wasn't a quarantine, those protests probably would have been 5 times larger. And so one of the needs that young people have right now is to be in the streets to focus on change. And what you and I need to do as parents and as mentors is to guide their activism for things that are beneficial. Guide their activism, whether its goal is justice, justice in the model of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If the goal is service, service in the model of the Prophet and the Sahaba, may peace be upon him, may Allah be pleased with them. But the point is, we have to encourage them for activism. And again, I already mentioned at the beginning that the community that I'm talking to right now, all of you, you already know khidmat very well. This, I think, is very easy for you to teach. This, in fact, I think you should be teaching all of the non-Turkish Muslims in our community, because you're already very strong in this. But the point is, we have to fuel their activism, but then guide it towards a deen perspective. The last big point on this topic of parenting is that in our community, we're very strong at teaching our children to be good students. And we're very strong at teaching our kids to be very good professionals. But often we're not very good, we're very strong at teaching them to be a good husband and wife. And so this is another type of training that parents have to give. So what is included in this? Your sons and daughters need to be taught how to cook. Your sons and daughters need to be taught what is adulting. And so this adulting, this is the word that college students love to use. What is adulting? It means to act like an adult. And I told the student, they asked me, how do you know when you're ready to be married? I said, when you're ready to act like an adult. And what does it mean to be an adult? It means you're taking responsibility for yourself. And so it's built into all of this. But what I'm saying is, in preparation for marriage, biggest partnership of your life, that as parents, we have to teach them how to be husband and wife. They're going to see it by watching how mom and dad talk to each other. They're going to see it anyway. But this is also something you have to actively teach them. Even when people want me to officiate their marriage, now I require them to sit with me, and we're going to go through some lessons on married life, and then I also require them to go through premarital counseling as well, to learn how to do marriage. But I'm saying this is so important now that I had to put it on this list, because I'm watching a lot of marriages not work. In fact, even I was talking to a couple today, I was talking to a different couple yesterday on just some of their problems are very basic, but there's so many forces in American society that are trying to get you to turn away from your husband and wife, which we can talk about. Okay, having said that, we're almost done. These are the phases of parenting. So security and freedom, punishment, reward, and competition, intellectual growth and excellence, expansion and activism, and then adulting. And then the last slide. So the less obvious phases of religious education. So as already I said in my assumptions, I'm already assuming that all of you, mashallah, are very strong Muslims. I'm already assuming that you're all very, very dedicated Muslims. And so these are just a couple points that I'd like to draw extra attention to. The first one is curiosity. And so all of us who have been parents, we know that, as soon as your child is 2 years old, they start asking every question. Why is the cloud like this? How come it's raining like this? Why can't I eat my ice cream now? I want to eat my ice cream before dinner. Every single type of question. And a lot of times it gets very tiring. But what you never want to do is stop your child's creativity, your child's curiosity. You want to nurture your child's curiosity. In all of our books, you see curiosity as something that is very precious. Okay. Which means when they're asking you questions, it's okay to say, I don't know. So Mahar, I'll be probably about 2 minutes, inshallah. And so it's okay to say, okay, I don't know, but let's figure out the answer. Work with your child to help find the answers. And then the next phase from there is let your child's creativity grow. And by creativity, let them think of things, like we say, outside of the box as a way to start figuring out solutions for their problem. And then as we get older, we translate creativity and solutions to knowledge and responsibility. And as you and I know, one of the teachings of the Prophet, may peace be upon him, is that wisdom is the lost property of the believer. So we search everywhere for wisdom, hikmah, and we take it. But it has to translate as responsibility to society, to yourself. And the last point, health and trauma. So our dean places very strong focus on health, physical health, mental health, so forth and so on, spiritual health. But trauma is a very big problem in our society as well too. I would even suggest the bombardment of social media is a type of trauma. And so what I'm also encouraging, in the same way I'm saying we need to have mentors in our community, you have to be a mentor for other people's children. Also look for those people who are training and helping people with their trauma. So we might call them the therapist, we might call them the sheikh, what have you, but people who can actually help with that. Because that's been something that's also been growing in our society. But what's the common element in all of this? Again, I believe that this community I'm talking to is already very strong in education. Feed curiosity. And then through the curiosity, they can develop creativity. And through creativity, they can develop knowledge and responsibility. With that, I hope that these brief remarks were of some benefit. I'll hand the microphone back over to Bahar and open the floor to any questions if anyone has any. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all.
Thank you so much for your lovely speech. So we have a couple questions. And the first one is, How can we arrange our children's time for social media and games?
Okay, that's a very good question. So the key thing is think of social media the same way you think of drinking Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Yeah, that people like to do it, but overall, it's not good for you. That there might even be some nourishment or some gain. And so in my case, I never let my kids have any Coke or Pepsi. And thankfully, most of their friends didn't drink any. But when it came time for social media, they wanted social media. And so you give them a small amount. Okay. But you keep it under control. So for all of these apps, there are other apps where you can monitor everything that your child is going through. Of course, your child is going to be smarter than you, and they're going to figure the way out around. I can't even tell you what the current apps are. My kids are older, so it's not as important anymore. But find those apps where you can monitor what your children are reading, what your children are looking at, and then give them a small amount. Okay. And also, when you see things in social media, discuss it with them. And so throughout my daughter's growth, so my younger daughter, mashallah, she just turned 18. If I talk to her in memes, it's more likely that she'll talk back to me, that she'll respond to me. But I will also say, hey, look at this meme of a person who's drinking alcohol. Look at how ridiculous this is. And they know, okay, I mean, we don't drink, we're not allowed to drink, but I'm doing this as a reminder. Or I'll show them something that's funny, or I'll show them something else that I'm not trying to make as a lesson, but as communication. So one thing, give them a small amount. Second thing, find the apps that you can monitor. And the third thing, try to communicate through those apps or through what you find in those apps. But that part is hard because today they're looking at TikTok, tomorrow they're going to look at something else, and tomorrow they're looking at something else, and then something else. So you have to try to keep up with all of your friends. They can tell you what's going on. That'd be the short answer, so small dosage.
Yes, so the next question is, how can we get them to get used to pray 5 times a day? Is there any rewards or punishments? Is there pros and cons?
Yeah. So here, essentially, I go back to the teaching of the prophet, peace be upon him, right? That you start them out a little bit, when they're kids, when they're about 7 years old, and then you get a little bit more firm when they're about 10. And obviously, the most important part is that you yourself are doing it. If you're not doing it, they're not going to do it, no matter how hard you try. But when they're younger, they see it as something fun. But then by the time they get to 10, you just make them do it. Their cognitive formation at that point is designed to just listen. So when it's those ages to pray, you make them pray. Of course, it can be hard with the school day during the winter time, that they might have Zohar during the school day. My daughter, the principal is told at this time she needs to take a break and pray. Yeah. Many parents might be too hesitant to tell the principal that. But the point is that if you then don't make the prayer in the daytime, then make the prayer with them after when they come back from school. But do it as a group. And ideally, if you can, eat dinner as a group, as a family too. Most of our families don't do that, right? Dad eats this time, mother eats this time, child eats this time, so forth and so on until you come home. So you try to eat together, you try to pray together. But the key thing is I follow what the prophet says, peace be upon him. 7, you get them into it, and 10, you get a little bit hopeful.
Okay, so the next question is, in your opinion, who can be the ideal mentors for our children, and what are the characteristics of a great mentor?
Okay, very good question. So it's everyone can be a mentor. So Bahar Mashallah is an 8th grader. She can be a mentor for 5th graders, because she's been through 5th grade. And so one type of mentoring is just life skills, and those would be the older people. And so one of the gifts that I had growing up that I didn't realize is I was surrounded by really good mentors, especially in my community service life. When I was in my 20s, there are these 60-year-olds that would take me under their wing and just teach me about the politics of an organization or dealing with people, even small, simple lessons like, don't be so aggressive, be nicer. And even, so again, I'm a teacher, but in a given week now, I have 4 or 5 teachers, and one mentor who I talk to for 4 hours a week. He's in his 80s, and officially we're meeting to work on Arabic, but the first hour of each meeting is we're just talking about life. And so just by virtue of having old life, so my people who are older, that automatically gives you some life skills. And the challenge there is that the older person has to be eager and energetic with the younger person. You've got to earn the younger person's trust. So that's another type of mentor. Another type of mentor is professional mentors. So if you want your child to go into medicine, you find this person. If you want your child to go into law, you find this person. If your child is going to go into teaching, you find this person. And so that would be another type. And then, of course, there's the mentors in dean. And sometimes that is the elder, and sometimes that's a different person. So I have specific training, and I give specific training, for example, to new converts or people who've been raised Muslim who are trying to rebuild their Islam, and then I'll start them with their prayers and their fasting and so forth and so on. So the point I'm making is every one of us has the skills to be a mentor. You just have to figure out in what way.
Okay, and so this is one of our last questions. How can a high school or college kid overcome many obstacles in the society, for example, like peer pressure, and embrace his or her Muslim identity confidently?
Fantastic question. So I grew up in public school from kindergarten, first grade through high school, nonstop public school. And for my school, this is in the south suburbs, for almost all of it, I was the only Muslim in the entire school. And so I understand exactly what you're talking about. And even then, I'll say my experience is probably easier than a high schooler's experience today, because I had all those challenges. You know, people started doing drugs in my school when I was in sixth grade. Like the first time I was exposed to other people doing cocaine was in sixth grade. And that's cocaine, that's marijuana, cocaine's worse. And so I've seen all those things, boyfriend, girlfriend relationships, alcohol, everything. And of course, bad language and those things. Bad language, I started learning these bad words when I was in grade school. And so I appreciate that. But we didn't have social media back then. We didn't even have the internet. So young people now have all of those challenges. And on top of that, you have social media. So how do you develop confidence in your deen? The first thing to do is engage with your full brain power in your deen. So I said that 14-year-olds understand everything that a 50-year-old person understands. Use all your strongest brain power and try to challenge the deen. And the deen is smarter than you. And so what will happen instead is that the deen is going to show that it's smarter than you are. But that's only if you want to do it. Meaning the best way to develop confidence in your deen is immerse yourself as hard as you can in your deen. Mentally, but also with your prayers. Because one of the benefits of your prayers is that it will strengthen your heart. It might seem embarrassing to do it, but try to be militant with yourself to make your prayers. Then, of course, see if you can find other Muslims that are in the same struggle, or see if you can find other non-Muslims that are in the same struggle too. Because even when I was growing up, there were a lot of conservative families that were very devout Christians and such. Put yourself in their company if you can't find good Muslims. And also just challenge your thinking, expand your creativity and such from a deen perspective. Meaning, there's this very famous story of this teacher who says, I like this one student more than all the other students. And they said, why? You should love all the students the same. He says, no, look, I gave this assignment to all my students, and look at how they answered. I said, okay, here's a piece of chicken. There's different, here's a chicken, a chick, and there's different versions of the story. And I want you to go and slaughter this chicken someplace where no one can find you. And so they all did it. One did it in a room, one did it in a barn, one person did it somewhere else. And one kid comes back with a live chicken. And they asked this one with the kid with live chicken, how come you didn't slaughter your chicken? And the kid said, well, everywhere I went, I knew Allah was watching. And so I couldn't find the place. I think you've all heard the story. And so at the very, very, very least, remember that Allah Ta'ala is not just watching you in terms of punishment, but He's watching you to take care of you. So every time you have a challenge, He's also giving you a way out. So you just have to keep looking for where the way out is to escape the challenge. And if that's not enough, we can have even further conversations.
Yes, and that was our last question. Thank you so much for your speech. This was very beneficial to many parents, including my own. Thank you so much.
If I can be of any service to anyone else, I'm very easy to find. Dr. Ali can give you my contact info, but if you just Google Muslim Chaplain Loyola, you can easily find my contact information. And as I mentioned, I have a lot of confidence in this community that I'm talking to. So I'm more worried about other communities, but any way I can help you individually, both as a person or as a family or as a whole community, please let me know. And my greatest respect is for Dr. Ali. He's one of the gems in our community. May Allah give him also more life and success, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.